Assalamu alaikum and welcome to another episode of Dear Masuma with myself, Sana Araji, and our guest Masuma Jaffar, who will be addressing any of your queries and concerns. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
So we're trying to kind of answer a few of our viewers' questions during this month of Muharram. Inshallah, we can try and help our dear viewers.
Inshallah.
So this is from a sister, and she says, Dear Masuma, my husband is very much pro-Azadari, and although I think this is a good thing, it doesn't appeal to me. Can I be considered a follower of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam if I don't partake in matam, tatbir and crying? I just don't really like doing these things in public, and it also doesn't personally appeal to me. Every year I feel like a bad Shia Muslim. Is it bad to not partake in Azadari during the month of Muharram?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I think this is a really important question because I think a lot of people have these queries about how they feel when they don't connect to these things, or are they considered as bad Shias, or what's right, what's wrong. So it's very difficult to sort of, it's not very black and white. I think one of the things that I would say, which is really, really important, is none of these things are wajib. Okay, so what makes you a bad Shia is when you don't do the wajibat or you do the muharramat. As long as you're doing everything that's wajib and staying away from everything that's haram, then you are a good Shia. And I think that's important to remember. The connection to certain personalities helps us because these are personalities that God has chosen to be our role models. For us to use people as role models, we need to connect to them. And the emotional connection is the easiest connection to build.
Yeah.
So you can see, like, when kids have a connection to footballers or film stars or something, then they'll start talking like them, dressing like them, behaving like them. And that won't happen if they're not connected to these people. And part of the Azadari is to actually connect to these holy personalities, one. And it's not just in Muharram, it's in all aspects of any of the wiladats or the shahadats of the Aima and the Holy Prophet and Bibi Fatima alayhi salam. It's important to commemorate or celebrate with them in order to connect to them. And secondly, in order to connect to the Imam of our time, because he will be feeling grief or happiness depending on whether it's a wiladat or a shahadat or a wiladat. So again, a lot of the times when we love someone and they're feeling sad, we feel sad too. When we love someone and they're feeling happy, we feel happy too. So for the love of our Imam, when he is feeling sad because he's commemorating a shahadat of his great-grandparent or father or someone, we should feel sad as well. And when he's happy, we should be happy as well. I think, so there's lots of issues here. So one is when we just concentrate on going to the mosque and commemorating or celebrating these events, then we think we've done our bit because we've taken that time out of our busy lives in order to go to mosque. So if it's a wiladat, we've actually bothered to get dressed up and then gone to mosque. If it's a shahadat, then we've taken time out and gone to mosque and cried and partaken in the majalis, and therefore we think we've done our bit, and therefore Imam should be happy, God should be happy, and then we move on, and nothing actually changes. So it's important to recognize that the emotional connection is the first part of the connection. It should lead on to something else. So I usually look at it in 4 steps of mourning.
Okay.
So the first step is the emotional connection, which is the easiest one to do. The second step is the intellectual connection, where now we're looking at, why is it that I'm crying? Why do I want to connect to these holy personalities? What is it that they were trying to tell us? What is their connection with God? How does this bring me closer to God? So actually thinking it through like that intellectually. The third one is, when I've got the emotional and the intellectual connection, then there should be some sort of action, because what's the point of it if there's no action?
Okay.
So then there should be some sort of action from within myself, even if it's just changing my mindset. my thoughts, even if it's just changing my, the way I behave or certain things I do in line with what these holy personalities did. So actually using them as role models. The fourth and the final step is, in order for me to change in a way that I'm now preparing for the coming of my Imam. So now it's not just about me, but about my friends and family and my community. So it's sort of the ripple effect. So my actions should be now such that they're actually having a ripple effect on those closest to me. And then they will have a ripple effect on those closest to them. And slowly like that, we will actually build a community which is ready for the coming of the Imam.
Right, okay. Yeah, no, that's quite a straightforward way of kind of breaking it down, isn't it?
And I think if we do it like that, then it has much more value. So
yeah.
This person who says that they really don't, partake in the matam or the tadbir or the crying because they don't connect to it, it doesn't personally appeal to them, I would ask them whether they've actually understood it fully. So, are they just doing it because that's what they've seen everyone else do and that's what they're told to do? Do you understand why you need to cry? First of all, the events of Karbala are so horrific that it would make anyone with a heart cry. You don't have to be a Muslim or a Shia to cry at what happened in Karbala.
Of course.
So it doesn't mean you're a good Shia just because you can cry.
Yeah.
And we have so many hadiths which talk about how important it is to cry. So again, showing that emotional connection is important, but it can't be all there is. So for example, the hadith says, I think this is a really nice way of looking at it. The hadith says that if you cry for Imam Hussein alayhi salam, then on the day of judgment, you will not cry because you will be given the good news of Jannah.
Subhanallah, yeah.
So does that mean I can do whatever I want all year round? When it comes to Ashura, I go to mosque, I cry for Imam Hussein, and that's it, I'm sorted.
Yeah. This is the thing that that crosses my mind, exactly what you said.
Now, so either the hadith is wrong, which we know it's not, it's an authentic hadith, so was the Imam who said it wrong? Was the Holy Prophet who said it wrong? Of course not.
Yeah.
So how does it make sense? Now, we've got to understand that there has to be conditions to these things. It's not just, he's not just our savior and that's it, I can do whatever. It has to make sense logically as well. Let me give you another hadith by Imam Ali alayhi salam, which is really beautiful. It says that anyone who recites the Holy Quran and still ends up in the fire of hell means that they have gone against the Quran, that they've made a mockery of the Quran. Because if you recite the Holy Quran, then you shouldn't go into the fire of hell. So the only reason why you're going into the fire of hell is because you made a mockery of the Holy Quran. What does that mean? That means I've recited the Quran, but I've not lived it. I've not actually lived by it. And that's why then I've ended up not going into that. That's why I've ended up going into the fire of hell, because I've made a mockery of it, because I've just read it, which didn't do anything. Or I read it without even being present I just read it just...
Not understanding anything.
Not understanding, not even being fully present. So I wasn't even taking the words of Allah in, because even if I didn't understand it, the words of Allah are so powerful that they would still have an effect on my soul. But I didn't even do that. I was just parrot fashion reading it. It's like when you teach, I've got a granddaughter at the moment where we're trying to teach her, verses from the Holy Quran, and she's just parrot fashion reciting it. She's she'll be reciting it while she's playing or something. She's not present fully there while she's doing it because she doesn't understand.
Of course, yeah.
So it's the same sort of principle. If I'm reciting it like a parrot, it's like my parents have got a parrot and they get him to recite, Allah, and it's like, it means nothing. He's just, repeating after you sort of thing. So if we take that hadith of Imam Ali alayhi salam, now we take it back to the hadith which talks about crying for Imam Hussein. If I cry for Imam Hussein and I still end up in the fire of hell, then that means I've made a mockery of the message of Imam Hussein. Yeah. So it shows that there must be something more than the crying. The crying is the first stage. The crying is the motivation. The crying is the oomph that I need to sort of push me forward.
Yeah.
Then I need to intellectually understand the message of Imam Hussein. I need to understand why he made this stand. What was it all about? And when I've understood that, then there must be some sort of action that comes out of it.
I think that's where that part is missing, the intellectual part, because I think in order for you not to feel anything, you don't understand the message of the actual story of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. Because like you said, if as a non-Muslim, if you read history about the Ahlul Bayt, it would make you cry.
Yeah.
You don't have to be a Muslim, like you said.
Exactly.
So there must be a lack of understanding for those who are not
feeling it.
Not feeling it. I mean, it takes me back to before I became Shia. Before I became Shia, I didn't have an understanding, so I couldn't connect. But that's because I didn't have the intellectual that stage that you're talking about. But once I understood it, then I became emotionally, intellectually, all of those 4 areas that you've mentioned. It made sense to me.
Yeah, and that's
and it would
what
be
it's done.
hard not to cry.
Exactly.
You know, you'd have to be inhumane, not a human being, not to cry.
And I think it's not even, you know, if once you understand it, then it's like you're saying, it's hard not to cry, but you're not crying from a sort of, you're actually crying from a Shia perspective, because when you're crying generally, you're crying from a human perspective. Oh my God, how could they have done that to a man? How could they have done that to a child? How could they have done? Whereas when you're crying as a Shia, it's like, this was God's most perfect creation on earth.
Yeah.
And those who claim to be Muslims, those who claim to have submitted to the will of Allah, actually slaughtered the most perfect creation of God on the earth at that time.
Yeah.
If that's not enough to make you cry, what is?
Yeah.
It's like,
yeah.
what are we doing?
Yeah.
How could we as Muslims have done this? You know, if it was non-Muslims who'd done it, then you think, okay, I can understand to some extent, because they didn't understand. But these people were praying. Some of them were, you know, were Hafiz the Quran. Some of, you know, they were believing in God. They were. Some of them had been present at the time of the Holy Prophet and heard what the Holy Prophet had said about Imam Hussein alayhi salam, and yet they managed to do something.
Yeah.
You're just like, oh my God.
It doesn't
and the
make
sad
sense,
thing is like, we feel that we need to have all the extra bits added on to make us cry. But seriously, the fact that the Imam, the Hujjah of Allah, was slaughtered in the way he was, should be enough to bring tears to our eyes.
Yeah, it's definitely.
It shouldn't be that we need to have the graphics of it.
No.
We shouldn't need the graphics of it. We only need the graphics of it because our hearts have become so hard, because we've not actually understood who he was. We've not, you know, we've not intellectually connected to the message at all.
Yeah, no, it's true. And I always say to others, I say, just see, if you have children, if something was to happen to your child, your offspring, you've carried them, how would you feel? I don't think any mother wouldn't break down. You know, as a mother, you would break down. When you know how special all of the Ahlul Bayt were to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, knowing that Allah loves us more than our own mother, how could you not? It's that if you will cry for your child, then you should be crying for them. Because you should you need to have that love for them, as if you can feel, as in it's a strange feeling, as if when you hear the stories, you feel the pain and you feel bad for the fact that someone like them has had to go through such pain. Like, who are we? Exactly. Like, we're literally, you know, just servants. We're nothing compared to them.
And I think that's a really beautiful point, because you said you feel the pain, and you feel the pain, and this is where then it goes down to, okay, so how do you show that pain?
Yes, exactly.
And different people show it in different ways. So I think the crying is something that is encouraged within our hadith text. So it's important that, you know, we're told that even if you can't cry, make your face as if you're trying to cry. You know, make yourself sort of going towards trying to cry. So even if you can't, actually recognize that it's something that you want to get to. It's a stage that you want to get to, because you need that emotional connection. Now, when it comes to the rest of it, the actual Azadari of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, how it's fulfilled is very culturally based. You know, people will do hold the alam in different ways, and if you look at the different alams, the way that they're made is different. The matam is different. You know, some people will do matam a specific way, some people will do it another way, and there's a lot of culture in there that comes into it. But I think what's important to remember is there is a personal grief that we feel, which is really, really important, but there's a collective grief that we should all show. And that's important because it brings us together as the lovers of the Ahlul Bayt. And I think that concept of the unity in the Ummah is really, really important, because then you connect to each other through the love of Imam Hussein. It's like if anyone's gone on the Arba'in walk, one of the things that you will really, really feel is this concept of unity and the love that every single person on that walk feels. It doesn't matter which culture you come from. It doesn't matter whether you're black or white or green or yellow. It really doesn't matter.
No.
It's the fact that you all love Imam Hussein alayhi salam, and and that concept of unity really comes in then. You can put everything else aside, and I think that's really, really beautiful. So I think there is this concept of collective grief, which is really, really, really important, which we need to focus on. And I think the easiest way to bring that collective grief, which works for everyone, is through matam. And the reason why matam connects to every single person is because it's a way of showing grief and in a collective way, where you're doing something slightly different so that you can actually, you stand out a little bit, but not so much that it makes people feel uncomfortable, if that makes sense. Okay, so you're not going to any extreme, but you're collectively doing something together. So it's like, for example, if I give you the example of clapping. Okay, if you appreciate a show that you've seen, you can appreciate it yourself, and that's great. You get quite a lot out of it. But when you all applaud together, you sort of come together appreciating that show. And if you've never seen clapping, to explain to someone that you just hit your hands together, they'll be like, but why?
Yeah.
What purpose does that serve? How does that help the person that's done the show? It's like, how are you showing gratitude? But because it's a recognized way of showing gratitude or showing the fact that, you've appreciated what they've done, no one questions it.
Yeah. It's
So in the same way, if we can explain to people that matam is a collective way, by me putting, just hitting my chest, it's a collective way of me showing my grief and my connection to what has happened. It's a collective way of showing grief. If I can explain that, then no one would have a problem with the matam itself. And then, dependent on how much pain I feel, I can decide on how soft or how hard I want to do it.
Exactly, yeah.
Again, I feel like when we do matam, we do it as a ritualistic thing or as a tick box exercise. So, the noha will be recited, and the words are very, very powerful if you actually concentrate on what the poetry is. But instead of concentrating on the words and actually feeling the grief, okay, again, I feel like the Masa'ib, usually what happens in the majalis of Imam Hussein alayhi salam is you have the majalis where something intellectual is discussed, something from maybe the life of Imam or the message of Imam or something, and then you will finish with Masa'ib, where they will go into the events of Karbala. From then, I think straight away you should go into the matam. I think if you have that break where you do the du'as and things like that, I think it brings the grief down a little bit. Yeah, you need to be on that heightened grief. And then when the matam happens, where the poetry is being recited, which is also talking about the events of Karbala, if you're listening to the poetry, and a lot of the times the problem is the poetry is maybe in a language that you don't understand.
That's another issue, yeah.
Then I suggest we should have it the translation in English so that people who don't understand the language can actually connect to it as well.
Of course.
Then when you're actually doing the matam, you're actually feeling the grief collectively. What tends to happen is you've cried, you've done your dua, now you've got up, and the language is something else, you don't understand it. So you're doing it, but you're talking to someone else, oh yeah, so what did you do over the weekend? Oh yeah, okay.
So true.
And you're just how is this grieving?
So
how is this showing collective grief? It makes no sense.
Yeah, no, you literally said exactly, and then that happens quite frequently
And
as
again,
well.
if you want to talk, that's your right. But go outside.
Go outside of the majalis.
Have respect to the fact that these people are grieving. It's like when you're grieving for for your beloved who's just passed away, and I'm talking about something which has got nothing to do with that. How disrespectful is that?
It is, yeah.
So if I don't want to do matam, if I don't feel like I'm connecting, if I don't want, then that's fine. It's not wajib. But go outside and respect the people who are connecting to it and who are doing it and actually trying to show that unity and that collective grief together.
Yeah, or just don't talk to anyone and just observe how everybody is mourning,
even
because
that would pull you in.
Exactly, because you get to see, like, how I see it is I feel like it's like the army of the Ahlul Bayt. So when for example, the march in London, which is mainly just matam, it's nothing like, it's not like the tatbir or anything like that. But you feel like it's the Ahlul Bayt army, like walking to support Imam Hussein, as if on the plains of Karbala, where he was by himself, that no, we are here to protect you. Like, we were not there then, but we're here now. And just that gives you goosebumps, doesn't it? When you think of it. And that's how I see it.
But I think what would be more powerful is actually if you're going to do it out in the public where you're doing it around non-Muslims, then actually explain to them what we're doing.
Of course.
Because for them to see us, because they don't understand what we're doing, then it doesn't make sense.
It doesn't. And it can shock them or it can scare them. So they need to, and we don't want to give Islam or Shia Islam a bad name. So they really do need to understand why and what you're doing. So maybe a speech before, maybe banners up explaining this is why we're doing.
Or leaflets that you hand out to them.
Exactly.
That's really important, because I think then they can actually then mull over it, and then they've got something written. Because even when you're giving the speech, they may not have been there, they may have caught half of it, they may not be listening.
Very true.
It's good to have all of these things, but I think, actually giving them a leaflet where you've just literally just a very short leaflet which explains the concept of Matham and this concept of collective grieving for what happened, and maybe sort of directing them to a website like Who's Hussein or something like that, which actually explains it very sort of without the emotional aspect of it, because again, they're not emotionally connecting, so they need to understand it from a logical perspective.
Yes, exactly. And especially even people from other sects as well. We need to make sure that everyone understands from different beliefs, different
and we
sects.
can explain it. It's not that we can't.
Yes,
I think the other thing, because like you said, it's this concept of grieving, okay, and it is very personal. So to tell someone not to do it a certain way, it can come across very disrespectful or very, sort of unemotional, sort of, and then there'll be these arguments about, are you a Shia because you're, how can you tell me not to do this or something, that sort of perspective. So I think it's important for us to realize everyone grieves in different ways, and that's fine. But the other thing you have to recognize is that your grieving should not be at the extent where it now brings down Shia Islam.
Exactly.
It's important that you recognize that your grieving should be something that helps Shia Islam to the next level.
Exactly.
Actually, makes people want to come towards Shia Islam, not makes people turn away from Shia Islam. So if you can't explain it, then either find out why you're doing it and find out how to explain it, or don't do it. Yeah. Because and we see this in the lives of the Ahlul Bayt. It's like Imam Ali alayhi salam, he didn't do certain things because obviously he wanted to. When he wasn't given the Khilafah, of course he wanted to fight for it, but he saw the greater good that at this moment it would have caused a civil war, which would have broken Islam. Yeah. So keeping aside his feelings for the greater good. And it's the same sort of principle. Yes, I may feel so much pain, but I need to keep aside my feelings and my pain and do what is required in order to bring Shia Islam up, rather than doing what feels right for me. And, this is how I feel and I'm going to do it and I don't care what you say. That doesn't work.
SubhanAllah. And that's your true test with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, kind of controlling and subduing yourself and when needed, isn't it really?
Exactly.
So, but yeah, thank you so much for that, Masuma. And hopefully the viewer can go back to those four steps that you had said as well, especially the intellectual stage, I think, which is quite crucial actually in that process.
But I think it's also important to make sure that the action happens, because I think a lot of people nowadays connect to the message intellectually, but they don't connect to it emotionally. Yeah. And therefore then they just look at it very sort of from a, yes, that was the right thing to do, but nothing comes out of it. So I think you need both the emotional and the intellectual, but you need action that comes out of it. Yes. The Azadari is there in order to bring about action, and if it's not bringing about action, if it's not changing you as a person, then there's a problem. If from the 1st of Muharram to the day of Ashura, if there's been no change in me whatsoever, then really what am I doing?
Exactly.
I need to be asking myself that set of questions.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Masuma. And inshallah, that's helped our dear viewer, and again, any other viewers who may have similar kind of concerns and queries. And inshallah, hopefully you can join us again for another episode of Dear Masuma. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.